Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to this edition of the Two World Podcast. Before we introduce our featured guest this day, we would like to introduce our co-host from the lovely country of Japan. We have with us.
I am Barney.
Thank you, Barney. It's good to be together with you again. And speaking of again, we are really excited to once again welcome to the Two World Podcast an author named Patricia Johns. A little background on her from information that I have, and then we'll get into our discussion today. Patricia is a best-selling novelist and author of nearly 60 books, and she received a BA in English Lit from the University of Toronto, and she is writing from Alberta, Canada, and she lives with her husband and still teenage, right? Teenage son. And she writes books featuring strong Amish women and the men who fall in love with them. And just a little bit of touting. Speaking of best-selling, recently, Patricia thanked her readers who rushed out and bought a copy of the book An Amish Baby in Her Arms. And because of those generous readers, this book made the #1 spot on Publishers' weekly bestsellers for mass market paperbacks. So congratulations on that. We will be focusing on the book Still Waters, but really excited to welcome back for the second time to the Two World Podcast, Patricia Johns. Good day to you.
Thank you so much. I'm really happy to be here.
Good, good, good. Before we get into Still Waters, which by the way, I'm like 85% through. I didn't finish it just so I wouldn't accidentally just throw out a spoiler.
That's considerate.
I'm anxious to get there, though. I'll tell you that. But by virtue of An Amish Baby in Her Arms, why do you think that particular book connected, so much with your readers?
I was wondering that myself. I honestly, I was racking my brain for what was the special ingredient on that book. I don't know. I don't know. I know babies are always a delightful draw. I love writing babies because my son is 17, so baby years are very far behind us. We're not doing that path again. So so I love to write babies just as just to remember the tiny baby phase. It sort of, gets it out of my system. But so I really honestly I was asking my husband, I'm like, why is this one so special? And I don't know. I think sometimes you just have a wonderful bout of timing where like I had one book that sold very well. It was a Christmas when a lot of places through the States and Canada was a brown Christmas. We didn't get snow. And mine had featured a snowman on the cover, and it sold very well because we all missed snow. So sometimes it's something as silly as that. I honestly I don't know. I'm just incredibly grateful. I'm a little baffled, but just delighted with that. I've never made #1 before, so that was a very, very exciting milestone for me.
Oh, great. Congratulations. Could you tease us a little bit with the premise of that book for our readers? Because we certainly
Well, for
encourage them
that
to
book,
continue this.
sure. By the time this interview airs, it won't be on the shelves anymore. You'll be able to grab it online, though. But An Amish Baby in Her Arms begins in a chocolate shop where a huge storm outside has risen up, and Miriam is working with her late husband's brother, and they've never really gotten along. She doesn't think he likes her very much, and there was a lot of tension within the family. And as they're closing up the shop that night, outside there's the sound of a newborn baby's cry through the storm. And so that kicks off the story. A baby is left on their doorstep. They have to care for this baby. They end up being stormed in together. So all of the tensions and the simmering feelings that she was not aware of come bubbling up to the surface during this massive storm with this newborn baby that needs care. So it combines the the drama and the deep feelings and the snuggles of a newborn baby, and we throw in a lot of chocolate and chocolate making, and it just ends up being a really fun combination.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, chocolate's a yeah, that's a likable, facet.
Yes.
Oh,
Yeah.
I, I think we mentioned last time how in your book, the first book that we talked about, Green Pastures, how you do such a fantastic job describing like the setting, like in terms of green pastures, and then in still waters, like the farm life, and really the details of farming, like the hog farm or whatnot. Not to focus too much on this other book, but did you have to do equal amounts of research for this chocolate making, or were you able to describe it in a way that you didn't have to go into, so much of the nitty-gritty of how it is that a chocolate factory runs, or, you know
I had done like in my 20s, I used to play around with making some chocolates when I was much younger. So I have a little bit of experience of making some chocolates. And then of course, it's okay, sometimes research follows me around, and in my social media feeds, I get a ton of candy making things that just pop up. It's like somehow these algorithms know me awfully
Oh,
well,
boy.
and things with food and cooking and chocolate and desserts just follow me. Like, all of those reels that pop up for me tend to be about that. So I had been watching, when this idea occurred to me, I had been watching months worth of these chocolate making things have been following me. So I feel like it was just bound to happen.
Oh, yeah.
that's fabulous.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of research, if we can sort of segue into in still waters, a question that came to me kinda I don't know if it made our list as such, but when the birthing of the calf and for our readers, this is very farm-oriented Amish story. The birthing of the calf, I just found breathtaking, the detail, and I mean, you're right there with Tabitha, who is the return to the Amish fold, veterinarian, who does such a great job of birthing this difficult, the birthing in this difficult situation of the calf. Wow, I mean, that had to take some research, I would think that was
That took a lot of research. That was a few hours of YouTube videos and looking up, veterinarian websites and all these sorts of things. So yeah, that took a lot of research. I I'm delighted actually that you really connected with that scene, because when I put the amount of time I put into research, sometimes you don't know if it's just gonna be a, "Yeah, yeah, yeah," and people sort of get past it and move on, and it doesn't make any impact. You never really know if your research is really gonna land, but yeah, that one did take a ton of research. I've never birthed a calf, but I have watched several veterinarians do so on YouTube videos.
mm,
So yeah, it's neat. It's neat that you connected with that, so thank you.
you're welcome. Yeah, and I have watched as well, and it's quite a process, and I was also thrown towards the PBS program, All Creatures Great and Small, and I think they do
Mm,
a
mm.
a very nice job of making you feel like this is really happening, and
Yeah,
yeah. Wow, great.
yeah, they do.
Sure. Barney?
Yeah. One thing that I have noticed about myself in the time since we've talked, that I find that I really gravitate toward books that are written in series, and especially books in your case that really have a lot of substance to them. Like, I tend not to, I don't know, binge read, if you could say that. One series, 1, 2, 3 in a row. I read one from a series and read a different, book of my interest, and then come back to that series. And it dawned on me that when I'm reading like secular books or books, that typically I, would really just enjoy, like for, some, I don't know, like lighthearted reading, I thought, wow, there's really something missing here. And then when I come back to books like Green Pastures and Still Waters, I find, oh yeah, that's what it is. It's this real nurturing substance to it, and and being able to follow the same characters that we're familiar with from the first book. And I'm curious, maybe the first part of my question is, how is it? What is the inspiration that you get, or what kind of sense do you have as you're writing and working in like this real kind of great substance, kind of especially in the Christian slant, adding some real spiritualness to your books. Like, is it something that you're able to just instinctively, naturally write into the story, or do you have to kind of map out how you want to, like, certain concepts or ideas that you want to work into the characters' lives, or how is it or is it different from book to book for you?
I think the spiritual aspect comes into it very naturally. I do write other books for Harlequin in the heartwarming line that are not, because of the promise of the line, they don't have spiritual aspects
Mm,
to them. However, I do have Amish characters in those books,
mm,
but I look at it more from a cultural perspective. And the difference I find between writing the ones that have the spiritual aspect and those that don't is when I'm writing with the spiritual aspect, I don't have to rein myself in. I don't, right? I don't have to say, "Oh, can't say that." I would, maybe I'll hint, "Oh, better not." I don't have to hold back and stop.
mhm,
I find for myself, like you were mentioning, when you're reading, the depth when that comes
mm,
with faith in a story. I agree with you on that. Years ago, I read the book The Alchemist. It's a classic, and my husband read it more recently, and so we were discussing it, and I don't remember the plot points as well because it's been about 15 years since I read it. But one of the things I still remember from reading it was that it came close to spirituality, and then it backed away.
huh,
And it started really strong where you go, "Ooh, this is gonna go somewhere really meaningful," and I was like, "Oh," and I was so ready for it, and I felt like it circled around and just never really landed there. And so now that's just my personal opinion. I know that that's gonna probably people who love the book are gonna be like, "Ah!" They're gonna feel strongly about that because I know, like I've got some in-laws who just adored the book, and they were like, "Oh, this is so great," and so but personally, my emotional reaction to it was I felt like it came close to coming to us in a spiritual direction, and then it just really backed away from, I guess, from it has the aspect of, there is a higher power, but do we owe that higher power anything is the
mm,
aspect it backed away from. And I feel like in our society today, even with spirituality, not in Christian books or overtly religious work, but just in our regular media and the way we look at things, that is the question that tends to be backed away from, is if there is this higher power, and lots of books and shows and movies will say, "Oh, yes, there is." What do we owe that higher power? Do we owe that higher power something of ourselves, or is that higher power gonna pat us on the head and shake our hands for having learned something during our time on the planet? And so I find that with my own writing, what we owe, it does factor into my writing. If God is there and God is real and God has expectations of us and how we live and how we grow, and what we owe back to him. And so that does definitely work its way into my writing. That is something that I find feels hollow to me in other books that I read that might have spiritual aspects, but they don't land the plane. Right? It just sort of circles around going, "Ooh, there is something more," and then flies off. And I'm like, "Get back over here." So that is something that's sort of yeah, yeah.
Wow. Well, that helps to explain a little bit of your character, Beth, who really is struggling with love versus faith versus staying in the fold. Uh, you want to talk about Beth a little bit and
Sure,
her
sure.
journey?
So for Still Waters, Beth is she used to come back to this community to see her grandmother every summer. So she knows the people in the community a little bit from her summers that she would stay there. And her father passed away. And so she's come back to spend time with her grandmother who has dementia. And they have to sell the house and bring her grandmother to live with family. And so she's there to help her grandmother get the house sorted out so they can come back. She can come back and live with family. And she has some answers. She has questions of her own. And her family wants her to make this decision for the church to get baptized. Once you're baptized into the Amish faith, that is a very powerful vow. If you were to leave after baptism, you would be shunned. If you leave before baptism, you can still come back and visit. So there'd be tensions. It wouldn't be easy. There would be tensions, but you could still come back. So for her, she has questions she wants answered before she makes that decision for the church, and it's very tough for her because she wants to she wants to fully understand her heritage and her history and the family stories before she makes that commitment to the church, and her family is holding out on her there. So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and the struggle with Mammy is, if I'm saying that
Yeah.
part
Yeah.
correctly,
Yeah.
within her dementia, but yet, as is typical, her long-term memory is pretty intact, and she's holding secrets, and,
Yeah.
yeah, Beth is certainly just trying to find a way to get that released,
Yeah.
utilize and know her background, yeah, that's really a great plot.
Well, I find with the one of the big things I focus on for this book is family stories. And for Beth, her family now I've noticed in my own life and with my father's family, my mother's family, my husband's family, everybody comes at family stories from a slightly different perspective. And so for Beth's family, much like my father's conservative Mennonite family stories are meant to edify. They are not meant to truly educate you on what happened. They are meant to edify, to give you something to be proud of, and to point you in the right direction. And that's how her grandmother and her family sees family stories as you give the younger generations as much as they need. You don't give them all of the information. You give them the information that they need to live a good life. And Beth wants more than that. She wants the truth. She wants the whole story. She wants to know what happened. And her family is very much holding out on her there. So,
Uh-huh. Mm, okay.
yeah, I don't want to yeah, I know
That's
you haven't read the
illuminating.
ending, so I don't want to ruin
Yeah,
anything for
that's enough.
maybe after this interview you'll go and finish it up and, and see what finally happens.
Oh, I will. Oh, man. Hmm.
Were
Well, there's
were sorry, were some of the family stories, like, adapted from in the book, adapted from the family stories that you or maybe the people around you heard when they were growing up?
Yes. Actually, see, my family has because from my father's side of the family, like I said, the conservative Mennonite family, we have the stories of how our family left Russia in 1920s, came to Canada. They were German-speaking Mennonites living in Russia. They came to Canada to escape war. Very noble stories of faith and endurance and coming to Canada and starting over. Very noble stories. They really are. Now, my mother's family, my mother's family is French Canadian, and they are a passionate people. And so her family stories are a lot different. Whereas the only stories my father knew were the edifying ones. My mom's family, they told stories to entertain. It didn't matter if great grandpa was a good guy or not. You got to hear this one. Right? So yeah, actually there are some stories in Still Waters that are actually adapted from my own family stories. She has a friend. I believe I named her Charlotte. I would have to look that up, but she's not a major character. She's someone I mentioned a couple of times. She has an Englisher friend who tells stories from her family history with absolutely no shame, and those stories are a little bit adapted from
Ah,
my French Canadian mother's family stories. So it was funny because my husband is a first generation Canadian, and I was chatting with my father-in-law, and he was asking, what brought your family to Canada, right? And so I told him, well, my father's family, they came, escaping war, and so they came looking for peace, and they came to escape war. And my mother's family came in about the 1700s because my great 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 grandfather killed a guy and he was escaping justice. So that's the difference between the family stories.
there's a
They
book
have
right there.
yeah, exactly. But you see, my family stories come with major plot holes. I don't know. I mean, I have stories, but I don't know how they all link together. And I honestly don't know how objectively true they are because stories get told and they get told again, and they get told again, and I'm sure they morph and they change and things happen to these stories over generations of retelling. And so even between my mother and my aunt, my the apparently my great grandfather, again, stories I tell with zero shame. My great grandfather owned a brothel, right? And my aunt said, "No, no, no, it wasn't a brothel. He was just sleeping with a lot of women." So you're
Oh,
like,
that.
but great grandma said, and so you have this, yeah, you end up with these sorts of things where even in like my mom's generation, there's disagreement on the details of these stories. I honestly don't know how much of them are like what there are kernels of truth. There's got to be how much, which are the kernels of truth. I don't really know, but those stories are formative, regardless of whether your family told you stories to edify you, like my father's family did, or just to give you wild entertainment, like my mother's family did. If those stories form you, right? It's your family history. One of the really formative stories that my mother's side told was how great grandpa, the apparent brothel owner, was also a violent drunk, and he was beating up great grandma. And so my grandmother came into the room. She didn't know what to do. She picked up an iron skillet and she smashed him over the head with it. And he dropped, and she thought she'd killed him. So she called her uncle, who was a police officer of some sort. He comes rushing over. He looks at his, brother-in-law or whoever he was, knocked out on the floor. And she says, I killed him. I killed him. What do I do? He said, oh, no, he's not dead. Hit him again.
Finish
So
the job.
exactly. We're not there yet. So these are the sorts of family stories that sort of go with you. And, it's entertaining and it's funny. But at the same time, it is educational because I learned from a very young age, hearing stories like this one, that you need to be very careful and you don't marry somebody who drinks or an alcoholic. That was one of the educational veins that we were taught quite often was stay away from a man who drinks because let me tell you about great grandpa, right? So and then you go off on these tales. So it's that sort of thing that it does form you and educate you. For myself, absolutely no shame in telling these wildly entertaining stories. I don't feel that my great-grandfather was a cad. And I'm like, yeah, he was a pretty bad guy. I don't feel that that reflects on me. I don't
Mm.
carry shame from that, right? Although it's from my husband's perspective, he was born and raised in Africa. From my father's family's perspective, stories like that would bring shame that they would carry with them,
Mm.
right? So for the Amish perspective, I look at family stories with that shame aspect of you don't want the younger generation to know that. You want them to be proud. You want them to have something to emulate. You don't want to teach them what to avoid. You want to teach them what to aim for. And it's it makes sense. I know a lot of families, maybe people who are listening to me are like, "Well, yes, that's more important to have something to emulate than to avoid." And I don't argue with that. But there are a different type of family story that sometimes are warning tales instead of examples to follow. And so that push and pull is a big part of this book where Mammy wants to only pass along the stories that people can emulate. And she does have I can't ruin it for anybody. but but the story that she is hiding is quite a juicy one.
Mhm.
But but she has good reason. She has good reason. But that relationship between family stories and who you are and how you face the world and what's important to you and just how you live your life is one of the big themes that I look at in Still Waters.
Well,
Do
it
do
just it
you
just go ahead, Barney.
yeah, sorry, do you ever find that maybe in the past or maybe even now still that you are able to use your books and the stories that you've written as kind of a teaching tool for your son?
He won't read them.
Okay.
He won't read them. I managed to impress him with getting the number 1 with
Yeah.
Publishers Weekly. I actually managed to impress my teenager. That is tough. That's
Yeah.
tough to impress your teenager. There comes a point where they just sort of you can impress your kids, and then they just stop being impressed. You're probably still in the point where your kids are impressed, right? Love it. Enjoy it, right? You're still your dad, you're the superhero. And so it's 17, they really are harder to impress, but he was actually impressed with that, and he bought me ice cream. He was like, Mom, gotta celebrate." So he bought me ice cream to celebrate that. So he's a sweet kid. But it's he won't actually read my books. However, he does I do use hard work, my work ethic as a teaching thing for him. Do you see how many hours I sit in front of a computer? Do you see how much that's what you have to do to focus. That's what you so he gets those lectures. But
Sure.
I don't think he once was doing I don't remember why he was reading. I think I was getting him just to do some edits for me, just looking for typos, right? So I sat him in front of a manuscript. I'm like, find typos for me. And so he read a chunk of a book and he was like, "This is really entertaining. I want to know what happens." I'm like, "Well, keep reading." He's like, "No, just tell me what happens and I can
Tell
go."
me. Yeah.
So I told him the ending.
Well, I'm
That's
thinking
as far as we
I'm
get.
thinking maybe he derives some satisfaction with this accomplishment that,
Yeah.
he does participate in the editing part and, a tiny little.
Oh, yeah. Oh, it's very much a family affair here. My writing my books is very much a family business. So, like, yesterday, I sent him out mailing packages to giveaway winners. He'll run errands for me. We're always because with online content, you've got to keep producing stuff for online for your readers to interact with your readers and that sort of thing. And so that's old dog, new trick, right? So so that's my thing I'm learning, right? And having a 17-year-old, he sort of knows how a lot of the apps and stuff work where I'm like, "Hey, how do I do this?" And he's like, "You don't know that?" Because his generation, they use all of this stuff that so anyways, having the 17-year-old, you know, IT guy is helpful. So but it's very much a family thing. With my husband, he loves telling people about, his wife's books, and like we'll discuss stories and how I'm going to make this work and how I'm going to make that work. And it really ends up being a family endeavor. So when something good happens like this, we're all like, "Yes, we did it." It's very much a group effort. Once my son is out of the house, I'm going to miss that. I'm going to miss having him be part of that family effort that we all work on together.
Mm.
Yeah.
Mm.
Wow, very cool. I was thinking, we're talking about book number 2 released. Is it November 5th? Is that correct, Patricia?
I believe so, yes.
Okay, or first week of November.
First
Uh,
week of November, yeah.
Did you know initially when you're writing Green Pastures, there's going to be 3 books here? Or how does that process work in your head when you have created a community
Mm.
and now we're into the story?
Well, this is rather unromantic, but I was told we need 3 books. So
Okay.
so I was working from the premise of 3 books were needed, and I needed to have a story that would span those 3 books. And so I was approaching it from that sort of perspective. So the shape of these books are that each book can be read as a standalone story. However, there is one overarching story that goes through all 3 books, and the overarching story is Tabitha's story. For those who have read Green Pastures, everyone who writes to me about it says, "Well, what about Tabitha? What's gonna happen with Tabitha?" And I'm like, "Ha, ha, ha." Tabitha's story does continue, and she does have a very nice ending to her story at the end of the 3rd book. So her story does continue through Still Waters, and in the 3rd book, Through the Valley, which I actually just finished writing. So Through the Valley, her story does wrap up in a very satisfying way. It was really cathartic to be able to finally write that because it's tough for Tabitha. She's come back home to Shepherd's Hill, her home community, but because she's divorced, she can't remarry under the Amish way of doing things and under the Amish belief system. She can't try again. And so she has to find meaning in other parts of her life. And it is a big sacrifice. Coming home for her involves a rather large sacrifice in that respect. So, but don't worry, I do take care of things. And so in Through the Valley, we do have things that wrap up for Tabitha in a very satisfying way. I can guarantee you will be happy and you'll be satisfied and you'll be like, "Oh, good. Tabitha's gonna be okay." Like I can promise you that. So, but I won't tell you how.
Yeah. No, don't want to know. Not
Yeah,
yet.
not yet.
Oh,
Yeah, a number of the books that you have written are kind of standalone books, and I think that we talked in our previous, back in March, that sometimes you kind of intentionally leave the ending, just slightly vague, or there might be a few slightly unresolved points that maybe us as the reader will fill in, what might happen here and there. And it especially leaves us hoping, oh, why can't we hear the rest of the story from your point of view, But
Yeah.
in this case, when they approached you and wanted 3 books, did did you find some characters that you thought might not be significant characters that kind of developed a life of their own, and you realized that you wanted to work them in more and more in the remaining books in the series?
mm,
Yeah. I I think Tabitha's father, I end up working a little more with him. He was never meant to be more than a background character, but he really got more of a life of his own. In fact, somebody had described the main characters of the book, and they'd actually include Tabitha's father in their description of it. And so they had really felt for Green Pastures. And I hadn't intended that. That was entirely unintentional on my part. I felt that he sort of grew and got more of a life of his own. In Still Waters, I have Tabitha and Jonas, whose relationship continues to grow in spite of their best efforts to curb that. They want to keep that line, their friendship line, very firm because she cannot marry. And there's no point in breaking hearts, right? There's no point in or getting more involved than they should, which would be inappropriate, and they would have to stop. And so they're both very aware of the limitations of this friendship and the line that it can't go past. And so for those two, they were like I had intended for them to stay front and center in all three books. So might give away something for you for for the third one, but I had intended them to remain front and center. And I found that as I was writing, Jonas actually grew in ways that I hadn't anticipated. I don't want to, again, give away too much, but Jonas did grow into a much deeper character than I had planned. I kind of count on that. As an author, you count on I am a plotter. So I need to know where things are going. I know what's going to happen. I knew when I began Green Pastures what was going to happen in Through the Valley. Like I knew where I was going with this series. But you kind of count on the growth you don't expect, those sort of magical moments in writing where you go, "Ooh, I did not anticipate that." You count on that to bring sort of the magic into a book. If everything was just simply planned, I thought it through and I put it on paper, you would have a good book. You bring in those unexpected sparkles and you've got a great one. So you sort of you count on being surprised yourself. If you aren't surprised yourself, you'd be disappointed.
What
So,
what are I'm just curious if you can describe what are those moments like when you're writing? And is it like a eureka moment or how is it that you realize, wow, I didn't expect, you know,
well, it is a little bit. Sometimes I find for myself, it has to do with sometimes like a backstory that brings a new emotional depth to the character. And with that new emotional depth, it really gives better motivation for their actions and for the direction the story is going. Also, I find the things that can add some sort of emotional conflict where I mean, like sort of within that. I'm sounding so vague. I don't want to give away story points.
sorry, so sorry, so sorry.
But it's
Understandable.
apologies, but it's where you're able to say, "Oh, this person becomes so much more real." And I find that a person feels more like a character feels more like a person when things don't always add up perfectly. You don't have a simple line from A to B. You have they were aiming towards C and they landed on B. Oops. Right? So when you have those sorts of the depth. I find that that's the moment where the real magic for me in the writing comes is when a character suddenly deepens on me in a way that I did not expect and adds a lot more emotional conflict for them where I need them to go in a certain direction and maybe they no longer want to go there. However, they have to go because the plot is going to force their hand and they're not going to have a choice, but they no longer want to go there. So things like that where you can really I find it when the characters feel like actual people,
Mm.
that's when you've got your reader, right?
Yeah.
When they're not saying, "Oh, yes, I see what they're doing. This is the plot, and if so he says this, and that's the what's way." Gotcha, gotcha, gotcha. When you have the reader so pulled in with this character that it feels like a person, and it's a gut punch when something happens to them.
Yeah.
That's when I'm like, "Yes." And as an aside, I do this to my readers. I am a cruel author. I will bring you in. I will tear your heart out. I will hurt you. But I don't like it when people do that to me. I can dish it out, but I cannot take it. I'm the person when watching a movie where I'm like, hold on a second. How does this end? I need to know how it ends. I can't take the tension. So that's me. I drive my family nuts. They're like, we're not telling you. I'm like, hold on. I'll Google it. So I can dish it out, and I dish it out. I think I dish it out well. I can dish it out, but I cannot take it.
That's fair and honest.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm really curious then. Those moments that Barney was alluding to in his question. I'm trying to picture you there at the keyboard. Does it just flow right down through your fingertips, or do
Mm,
you sit back and go, "Oh,
mm,
I think here's a moment in the plot where,"
mm,
and then you think it through for X amount of minutes and then back to the keyboard. How does that look?
mm,
Well, normally my first draft is pretty quick. So I find that I write better if I just keep things moving for my first draft. So my first draft, I'm sitting down and I'm fingers to keyboard, I'm getting her done. When I'm editing, that's when the stuff comes in, right? So that's when I will sit down and be like, I come to this scene and I'm like, nah, it doesn't feel right. No,
mm,
no, right? Something's missing. I might flag it to come back to, and then like last night I was from editing, I was laying in bed. I got up and I came running out here and I wrote on a Post-it note what had to change in the scene. It occurred to me. I'm like, that's what it is. And I came rushing out to write it on a Post-it note. And so I've got it here on my desk. So that's something I actually changed this morning before our chat, as I had to change the scene because I knew what had to change. So I find that the deepening and the eureka moments for me happen in the editing. So after I've got everything down the way I've planned it, I come back and I realize as I'm reading it, it doesn't feel right. Like that comes down to like the very subjective, like the feeling of it. I'm like, nah, this feels off. Something's not. And so that's when you'll see me with a conflicted look on my face, madly knitting. That's my knitting moment. And I'm like knitting away, trying to think it through, and then I finally get my aha moment. I'd moved past. I knew it wasn't quite right, but I thought, well, maybe the editor can let me know. Maybe an outside perspective will help me with that. And so I carried on and jumped out of bed, ha ha, pattering out here. so so
Well,
that the magic happens in editing, I think.
I truly hope viewers, you're watching this enthusiasm after 60 books,
mm.
that she still has those moments of, I got to get this written down right now. It reminds me of a little bit of Jerry Seinfeld. He would do the same thing. He would jump out of bed and get that piece of paper, and there's the formula
Yeah,
for this particular joke, and then, try to sleep after that. That's amazing.
yeah.
We became aware of the fact that your writing had slowed at moments because you were tending toward now the creation of reels. Do you want to address that a little bit and tell us
My summer, yeah. The
oh,
summer of reels.
of reels?
So it's well, I always meet a deadline, okay? Just put that out there first. I have deadlines to meet. I always meet my deadlines. But I sometimes would write and just get wildly ahead of my deadlines. And now that I've been doing more reels and I've been trying to up my marketing game. I'm trying to up my game in social media interactions with my readers, and I'm trying to learn and grow. One of the publicity team at Bethany House had sent me some things I could buy and tutorials to figure out how to do this stuff, and I was like, "Okay, let's do this." So I've been learning a lot and figuring out how to do just these reels are just very short videos. And it's a way to interact with your readers to maybe lure them in for the books that you're writing, of the books that are on the shelves. It might just be something that's of interest so that they get to know you a little bit better, or they want to be on your page. They want to I might also write do a reel about another author's book that I enjoyed or that is on the shelves right now or whatever it is. So I want to provide content for my readers that they want to be around me. They want to be
Mm.
around my page and they want to buy my books, ultimately. That's why I'm there. And so that has been quite quite a learning process, but it's been fun. I'm starting to loosen up when it comes to the reels and find new and different things that I can do, and I'm having a lot of fun with it. But it is, as you said, it's more time consuming than, than not. So so sometimes where I used to be able to get all of my writing done by, say, 5 p.m., and my husband would sort of anticipate that he would get home from work and, my writing would be done, I'd be his for the evening, and but now he's getting home and my writing's not done yet. I still have another hour and a half I need to get done, and it's because I can't make reels in front of my family. I feel like a moron. It's like, you know, ham up for my cell phone camera. I feel like an idiot. I can't do it with actual people looking at me, right? So I do that when they're out so that I can make these reels and that's all done when no one is watching me. So I will use some of that time when they're gone. Instead of fingers to keyboard, I'm making reels and thinking up new ideas and stuff like that. So it has slowed me down a little bit, which means my supper game has been off. And like, I think my he's starting to feel it. He understands that like I do have a job and I need to get this work done and it does involve the social media aspect and it takes time. But he gets home and I'm like, oh yeah. No, I'm just finishing this up really quick. And you know, it's starting to get tougher on him. So I think I have to rebalance a little bit again. Just because you're always sort of doing that, right? Where like you try something, this is fun, it takes up a bunch more time and wait, priorities. That's right. I'm gonna grow old with this man. I should feed him. So
Oh, that's funny. I remember I auditioned one time, Patricia, in front of a camera, the people behind there asking questions, and I remember sitting there the whole time thinking, "I'm such an idiot. I'm such an idiot. I'm such an idiot,"
Yes.
wh
Yes.
which I think directly correlated with the role I was given
Which works
in
for you, right?
in this short film, which was fine. Oh, man.
Yeah, I find that, like, being in front of a camera, especially for a reel where you have to do things very quickly, it's gotta be, like, 30 seconds, I wanna say
Mhm.
this, and I'm like, "Oh, shoot, I didn't say it fast enough. Stop, delete. Okay, say it again. Ooh, I should cut that part out. Okay, stop, delete, and say it again." So, you're doing a bunch of this, and you're trying to get it down to the right part, and then you realize you got a piece of hair
Oh,
poking up the entire time, and you're like, "No, delete." Like, so it's a bit of a learning thing, I guess, like, yeah, oops, I'm having a lot of fun with it, I'm enjoying it. It's a new creative outlet. It's I'm finding, I guess, a renewed interest in the marketing side of the writing, which is I find for most writers is a real challenge because we like to disappear behind our keyboards and don't look at us. We're just gonna get the work done. So yeah, it's a new side to it that I'm learning to enjoy, and I think as the expectations from publishers change, this is something we have to be doing. They want us to be marketing. They want us to have a social media presence to put ourselves out there. It is an expectation of the job. It didn't used to be. I mean, authors who are the big ones from 20, 30 years ago, they were expected to stay mysterious and
mm,
quiet and just do the work and, don't say anything. So I find that now with those changed expectations, we simply have to change with it. So if the publishers are wanting us to have more of a presence on social media and stuff, then we have to figure out how.
Mm,
So,
yeah.
yeah.
And I would invite our viewers to subscribe to Patricia's newsletter.
Oh, thank you.
I'm embarrassed to say it wasn't until a week ago that I subscribed. It should have been much sooner. I apologize, but it's well done.
Better late than never.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh my.
Yeah, I hope people do subscribe to my newsletter. I make a point of having giveaways on my newsletter. I used to be able to do giveaways on Facebook, and then the trolls came in and started scamming people, so we had to stop that. You know, technology or, the scammers change, and you have to adjust to protect your readers. And
Mm,
one very safe place I can do the giveaways is in my newsletter.
mm,
No one can get at that. So that's where I do tend to do the vast majority of giveaways of my books, but also of like other authors' books that are probably similar to mine. I will do giveaways for those. Also, I do like knitted bookmarks and things like that I love to get into my readers' hands because
Right.
when I am thinking through things and knitting madly, bookmarks happen. so, so
Yeah.
yeah, so I hope people do sign up. I
So
try to make sure it's a monthly newsletter. You won't hear from me more often than that. And I do try to make sure that there is some quality content in there to make it worth their while.
mhm, great. I I am interested. I volunteer in a thrift store, and there are a number of Amish people buying lots of Amish books, and knowing that a lot of them now have phones and things like that. Do Amish readers ever reach out to you, to your knowledge, to react to what they're reading from you?
No, but people who have Amish family have reached out. So people who are not Amish but are related to Amish people have reached out and said that they really felt I represented things really well. I really got how the Amish see this or see that very, very well. So that always it feels very rewarding when I'm like, "Oh, good. I've gotten that accurately." So I know I have not heard to answer your question, I have not heard from Amish people who have read my books, although I have been told that Amish people do read Amish romance, but they have not reached out to me. I have been told that they do, however, but the people who I hear from tend to be, let's say, a non-Amish daughter-in-law, for example, who would say, "You know what? Like, you do a really good job with
mm.
this." So, and an outsider's perspective, but they have a much closer relationship to the Amish world, and yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, Ken, did you have any final questions or any thoughts that you wanted to have say before we wrap up for today?
Well, it's been great fun again. Thank you for making time in Alberta for us. It's in part the joy and the fun of talking about a new book, and coupled with the friendliness that you exude. It's like meeting with a friend and rehashing the things that have gone on since March, and I love that part too. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. I love visiting with you guys. We always have a good conversation. The book is on the shelves right now for those who are listening at this point. I believe by the time this will be aired, the book would be on the shelves if we are in November. Spoiler, it's not November right now as we record this, but it's going to be on the shelves in November. The first week of November, it will be out. I do hope you will rush out and grab a copy. If you haven't read Green Pastures yet, you can read them separately, but I think you'd enjoy it just a little bit more if you have read Green Pastures. So if people want to pick up a copy of Green Pastures and Still Waters is the next book that would be out, I hope they'll grab them both.
And I cannot echo Patricia's or Ken's sentiments enough. It's really has been so much fun today. And today, me being here in Japan, it's always a little bit later for when we start recording, but I really look forward to the times when we get to meet with Patricia. And I too would like to say, yes, look for Still Waters. read Green Pastures, and even check out some of Patricia's books from the past. I really like her cowboy series, to be honest, and the rancher ones. I really enjoyed those. And yeah, and check her out. Check out the reels. Check out her website. Subscribe to the newsletter. You will be very, very glad that you did. And so for the Two World Podcast, I am Barney, and my co-host today is Ken, and we had the very wonderful pleasure of having Patricia Johns on with us today too. And we hope that you, as all of us, are looking forward to the next episode, and we'll see you again then. Thank you all, and take care.